What is coolin'? What's going on? I hope you guys are doing amazing. We got the 49ers today. Also want to apologize real quick about my voice. I've been under the weather, got the flu, and it's just been a little bit of a rocky, turbulent vibe. So pardon me with butchering some names as I normally do, but it's probably gonna be a little worse than casual this today. But we'll cross that bridge when it comes to it. And yes, the pun is intended. We are going to talk about the San Francisco 49ers. Let's get to the Golden Gate Bridge today, which I have a lot to talk about with this team. So let's go ahead and start by talking about the offense and the offensive line, which this offensive line this year has been a little up and down. They've had some good games. They've had some rough games. In general, they need to add a couple of pieces here and there. And you got to think about the future as well in this regard because Trent Williams getting a little bit older. I know they gave him an extension. However, he's been a little more injury banged up. You have Jalen Moore, who stepped up and been a really nice swing tackle for them and fill in for Trent Williams. However, we need to continue to invest in this offensive line. Colton McKivitz over at right tackle is still an area that they could upgrade from. And McKivitz it's not been bad either. However, I feel like that they definitely could still some influx of youth in this tackle room. So I'll be looking at that relatively early in this draft. I think that's a round 1 through round 3 type of need for this team. And keeping Jalen Moore, too, will be huge, right? Because he's been a good swing tackle for them. And they've developed him as well. So definitely been a nice pickup from Western Michigan a few years back. On the interior of the offensive line, the big thing is left guard Aaron Banks is a free agent. So they could end up losing one of their starters in free agency. Aaron Banks is solid. Would I pay him what he's probably going to get offered in free agency? Heck no, right? You saw Jonah Jackson last year get a monster contract. If Aaron Banks gets something in that sort of mold, I'm not paying him that much. That's just too much, in my opinion, especially with future needs and contracts coming up, Brock Purdy, that this team has to be looking at. So I'm just not willing to fork over that cash. If he's willing to come back on more of like an $8 million a year type of deal, then that makes a lot of sense to me. But I'm not paying this guy $16+ million a year. That's just way too much, in my opinion, for Aaron Banks. So we could be looking at that interior. We'll talk more about that when we get into the free agency strategy. Jake Brendel, I will be looking to upgrade for the future here. Now, Brendel's probably going to be back into next season, and that's okay. Brendel's not terrible. They certainly could use an upgrade, though, there. And there's really nobody there. I mean, we'll see Drake Nugent. They can bring back as an exclusive restricted. Nick Zagel. I don't know a whole ton there, but I think that this is an area that we will certainly be looking at somewhere in that 3rd to 5th round. Makes a lot of sense to try to get a developmental center that can sit behind Jake Brendel for one season, then hopefully take over after that and beyond. Now, you do have some good news here. Dominique Pooney seems to be a franchise right guard for you guys, so that's a locked and loaded position. He did come off one of his worst games of the season versus the Rams, and that's a tough interior defensive line. And Colby Turner was kind of getting the best of him. Overall, though, he's had a really good rookie season and continuing to build upon that. I think you found a really good player in Dominique Pooney. You got Spencer Burford, who's a nice backup as well, who can fill in. Joe Feliciano is a free agent. He's been injured this season. So I would just say right tackle of the future is vitally important for this offensive line, and left guard could also be a pretty big need for this team, depending on what they do with Aaron Banks in free agency. And going on to the tight end room here, George Kittle, he's a stud. He's one of the best tight ends in the NFL. It's crazy. The best tight end in the NFL might be a rookie, of course, in Brock Bowers, but George Kittle, I think, is still the most well-rounded tight end in the NFL. And Kittle is under contract for another year. However, he is going to last year of his deal. He's going to be 33 next season, I believe. So those are a couple of question marks. I expect them to extend him, especially if they want to lower his cap number a little bit this offseason, which they may want to do. So I'm not worried about that. I would be looking at a number 2 tight end, right? They don't really have a quality number 2. Eric Schubert's not bad. Maybe they can continue to develop Braden Willis out of Oklahoma. I will be looking at adding, especially in a good tight end class. I think this makes a lot of sense to try to find that future tight end for this team, find some youth there in the room. Wide receiver wise, this is an area that they should be good to go. Now, there are injury questions, of course, with Brandon Ayuk. He coming off a pretty serious injury, of course. How will he be, with the ACL, etc. However, you do have Deebo Samuel still under contract. You drafted Ricky Pearsall, and you got Juwan Jennings. And Juwan Jennings has actually been their best receiver, in my opinion, this year. And that's not even close. I think he's been by far their best receiver consistency-wise throughout the entirety of the season. Even with Brandon Ayuk earlier in the year, I think Juwan Jennings has been their best man. He's been really, really good, the best man. But anyway, yes, this is not weddings out here. This is the 49ers, and Jawan Jennings has certainly been a really good football player. And he's somebody that they probably should have given some of that money to Brandon Ayuk instead. Anyway, that is what it is. It's spilled milk at this point. Hopefully, Brandon Ayuk gets back healthy next year, and you see this 3-4 combination now with Ricky Pearsall come for fruition. Now, Debo, I would be interested to see what they decide to do, especially if Brandon Ayuk, if there's some more, injury questions, because he is going to last year's deal. I would not give him an extension, but that could be something they work out too if they wanted to lower that cap number. They can't get out of his contract this season, so I expect Debo to be back. And obviously, you got Ricky Pearsall still developing. I expect Ricky Pearsall, this offense too is tough to learn. So I expect Pearsall to have a year 2 type breakout. Expect to see a lot more out of Pearsall next year. I still like Pearsall. I'm not saying he's going to be a true number 1, top flight, top 5 receiver, but I think he's going to be very productive and a very good player. And I've actually been he got shot. Okay. I mean, let's be blunt. He got shot. That's not easy to come back from. Let's just be real. So let's give him a little bit of time. I expect bigger, better things from him next year with a full off season to be able to get with this team in a tough offense to learn. So yeah, I think they're in a good spot. Jacob Cowling, a good special teamer. Those 5 guys. Chris Conley's not bad either. Maybe they bring him back on the cheap. He's a good special teamer too, whatnot. So yeah, I think their wide receiving room looks pretty good. Not a huge need. Maybe a late round gem. Running back wise, they can always use depth at the running back position. Juice check is going into last year of his contract, so maybe we try to find a developmental juice check in this draft. I think that could be something that gets very interesting too for this team, because Kyle Juszczyk's so invaluable to this football team and what he means, and obviously energy that he brings to the 49er football team is also important. But McCaffrey been dealing with injuries and obviously now ends up on IR. That was unfortunate. McCaffrey's a beast, but when he's out, it definitely hurts this football team, as we can see. Jordan Mason definitely stepped up. He got injured, unfortunately landed on IR as well. Isaac Guerendo even has stepped up. He's been a little banged up too, but Guerendo's been really nice to fill in. So between Guerendo, Mason, and McCaffrey, hopefully those 3 guys, at least, you can stay, 1 to 2 of those guys can stay healthy. You feel good about him. And McCaffrey, of course, you want to stay healthy. McCaffrey's getting a little bit older too now, at 29 next season, something like that. So maybe you start drafting another, but I think they should be good with Guerendo for the long haul. Mason is a restricted free agent, so you might have to think about tendering him. We'll talk about that more in free agency. Overall, those 3 guys in tandem should be a really good duo heading into next year. Just staying healthy is critical. Mitchell is a free agent. He's been banged up. He's a good football player. Just injuries have been a big problem with Mitchell. Quarterback-wise, Brock Purdy. I actually like Brock Purdy still. I know he gets a little bit more hate, and I think it's just because the 49er fans are a little tough, and I get that. As a Jets fan, I'm tough on the quarterback situation, but Brock Purdy is a very solid, if nothing else, good game manager, but I feel him as a little bit more than just a game manager. I see him there are games where it's like, what are you doing? Why are you throwing those passes? It's like YOLO passes at times with Brock Purdy. But for the most part, I think Brock Purdy is still way better than a lot of starting quarterbacks. I still view him as a top 15 quarterback in the NFL, and that reflects my grade of an 80 overall plus starter in the NFL. He's somebody that I think he can get you, and he can get you to a Super Bowl, obviously, and I do think he can win a Super Bowl. He needs a good football team, but I think every quarterback needs a good football team in general. You have to be well-rounded as a team. Brock Purdy, good player. I would certainly look at extending him. He's going to get a monster bag after this offseason. The big question here would just be, who do you bring back as your backup? Brandon Allen, Joshua Dobbs, both free agents. So I would certainly be looking at re-signing one of those guys. Maybe bring somebody at a free agency. Go on to the defense here and start with the edge position. The edge position's been a little inconsistent. Actually been one of the areas that I think that, especially going into this offseason, they're going to certainly be looking to invest in, especially as much as Lynch and Shanahan and this organization values the defensive line. Don't be surprised if they go after the edge position early, especially with some of the veterans that they have here with Leonard Floyd and then also Yetur Gross-Matos. He's not a veteran, but I would say that those 2 guys going into last year of their contracts, and Drake Jackson been injured a lot. I don't know if they're going to be willing to bank on that sort of at this point. So that's a little bit just what you can get out of it. Availability is your best ability. I know Drake Jackson has the talent. It's just he hasn't been on the football field. Maybe you got something with Robert Beal Jr. I will say Sam Okuwanu has been a nice little find there. He's been really, really good. Somebody's got some good burst and explosion off the line and grit that I really like from him. And he's made some big-time plays throughout the season. So keeping him around is heavily important. He's a restricted, so he should be back no problem. However, as I talk about for the future, who's going to be that number 2 guy next to Nick Bosa? That is the big thing here, because Floyd going to last year of his contract, same thing with Gross Matos. And Matos, and as I talk about, other than the Bears game, like some of these guys, it's been a little on and off. Matos, I haven't really seen him besides the Bears game. So that inconsistency to me is certainly something that's shown up on film. You can destroy bad offensive lines, but what about those good offensive lines when you need it on third down? That's really what this team has struggled on, is getting teams off on third down. And that is where I think that they need to juice up this pass rush some more. And I think it's actually a pretty big need, a sneaky need for this team. On to the interior of the defensive line, also a need for this team. Javon Hargrave injured, and that's been a big disappointment for this team. The signing that, they were hoping to get a lot more out of Javon Hargrave. Don't be surprised if they cut him. Now, the only problem with cutting him is they save literally no money, basically. Even if they post June 1st it, you might as well keep him into next year and then cut him in 2026 because you're paying him for 2025 no matter what. So Hargrave, you just kind of hope that he gets healthy next year, can give you some production. He's still a good football player. It just has not really been for the 49ers just yet. Lee Collins is also a solid football player, so you keep him under contract on a cheap deal. I don't mind that. Keep him around, overall fine. Jordan Elliott's been a rotational player. Evan Anderson's been a nice rotational player. He's a restricted. Bring him back for sure. Kevin Givens been a rotational player. So I certainly will be looking at the future here because they need to add some youth into this room. Both Hargrave and Collins are over 30 now at this point, and then between the free agents that they have, certainly need to add. This is a round 1 through round 3 type of need. Just like the edge rushing position, I think you're just going BPA between interior defensive line and edge in those first 3 rounds. These are 2 needs, pretty big needs for this team. And then we go on to the linebacking room. This is not a need as long as you bring back Dre Greenlaw. You got 2 studs. I mean, just looking back on this Rams game, the impact that Dre Greenlaw has. They did not lose that game because of the defense, right? Dre Greenlaw, Fred Warner are studs. Those 2 guys are the best linebacking duo when healthy in football. There's no question in my mind. They are phenomenal football players. So re-signing Dre Greenlaw is ever more important. I get it, the torn Achilles that he's coming off of. I'm glad to see him back on the football field here. It's a great moment, him coming out of the tunnel this past one, but now you got to re-sign him. That is going to be huge for this football team. You got D. Winters as a great backup will linebacker as well. And you got some younger guys like Tatum Bethune. I like him. He's a good athlete that he can develop into a 4th guy. If nothing else, great special teamer. And I feel like can fill in for Flanagan Flores for the long haul there in that role. Jalen Graham, another guy, or Curtis Robinson to keep an eye out too on. So I feel pretty good about this linebacking core. It's a late round throw maybe / free agent type pickup, but not that big of a need as long as you bring back Dre Greenlaw, which I think he's going to want to come back. He just seems like he loves the Niners. Let's go on to the cornerback room here. Javarius Ward's had a down year. He's still a good football player. He's just had a down football year. And that happens. So the cornerback position especially has been a little banged up too. So that can be a problem, especially at the cornerback position. Renardo Green's been really good for a rookie. DeMar Lenore, not even just for a rookie. He's been a good football player. DeMar Lenore has been a beast. So, he's starting to work into a star cornerback, and he's been able to play in the slot and out wide for this team. That versatility has been huge for them. He's been their number 1 corner. So I feel like we're between Green and Lenore, they've got their 2 young core pieces. I would bring in a veteran here and then draft for the future on the outside, or just add in another piece at some point, especially since this team doesn't seem to value corner as much, especially in the early round picks. Maybe they change that this year. I don't see them doing that, which is, hey, you never know. We'll see, right? Teams change. We see it every single time. Like sometimes you'll say, oh, the team's not going to do this, and then they end up doing it. So we'll see how that all works out. In general, though, I feel like their cornerback room is solid. It could certainly add, they still could use maybe one more piece into the room. We'll see if they end up doing that. And I expect them to draft somebody. It just may not be as early as maybe, depending on what maybe I would do or whatever, just because of the way this organization values the defensive line a lot more than the cornerback room. But their cornerback room's been nice, and Green, Lenore have certainly stepped up as a youth in this room. And obviously they just paid Lenore, so they should be locked in for a very long time with those 2 guys. Let's go on to the safety room here. Malik Mustafa and Jair Brown, and now getting Talanoa Hufanga back has been phenomenal. I almost say use Hufanga as like a Will hybrid linebacker. Just get him as that missile slash playmaker, because that's really what Hufanga is, man. He is a playmaker and he just makes tons of freaking plays. I love watching Hufanga, and getting him back on the football field is huge. Mustafa's been good as a rookie. Jair Brown's been solid as well. So they got a nice, really good tandem. George Odom's still under contract. He's a little banged up this season. However, I feel like their safety room is really solid. I would look at some more depth because of the free agents that they have here, and thinking about long haul as that, that number 3, number 4 guy. Plus Hufanga is going to be somebody that, is into a contract year as well. I would expect them to bring him back. He should be, like a 1-year prove it sort of thing. But that would be something like a late round type of throw, just as some special teams depth. Let's go on to the free agency strategy though now here, starting with the team cuts. I thought about cutting Javon Hargrave, but looking at the money, as I talked about earlier, I just don't think it's worth it. So we're going to move on here. No cuts. Team free agent re-signs here. I'm going to go ahead and re-sign a couple of guys here, especially on the offense side. I decided to bring back Joshua Dobbs. They could bring Brandon Allen back. Maybe that familiarity, you keep him instead. Either which way, you find one of those guys, you bring him back, and that's fine. Jordan Mason, I'm going to give him that second round tender. 5.3 is the projected tender, I believe. So, yeah, let's go ahead and hit him up with that. Patrick Taylor, bring him back as some depth. You got Eric Schubert, Ben Barch, depth, Jalen Moore. Bringing him back on a 2-year, $8 million deal. He's a really good swing tackle. Got to keep him around, especially for injuries. Trent Williams getting a little bit older while he's still a stud. You want to make sure you got that swing tackle on lock. And who knows, maybe he could be the long-term left tackle. It's possible, man. He certainly looks pretty comfortable at it. He looks good. I like him. Defensively wise, Dre Greenlaw, must. I'm bringing him back 2 years. $22 million, $11 million. He might get a little bit more. He might get a little less. It depends, right? Some teams will be scared about that Achilles injury and how, effective he's going to be for the rest of his career. I say, let's give him a contract, right? This guy's stud still, and I'm rocking with Dre Greenlaw, keeping him around. Isaac Yadam, good depth there. Keep him around. And then last but not least, Talanoga Hufanga. What a great name. And you got Mustafa, Hufanga, and Brown. I mean, oh my gosh. 1 year, $4 million, prove it deal, and then you can give him a long-term extension, afterwards if possible. But practice squad / restricted free agents, I do count $10 million because you got a lot of guys like Sam Aquanu, Evan Anderson, and many other, restricted practice squad guys that you have to fill out. Now, not all of it's going to count. You got your top 51 rule and all those sort of stuff. But anyway, I just like to budget in a nice little amount there and keeping that around. Let's go into the free agent signs now. I'm going to be strategic about this, only bringing in a couple of guys. Dalton Reisner is going to be someone I bring in at that left guard position. I feel like this is a very fair contract. It puts him in line with, that mid-tier Isaac Samalu range and all those sort of guys where it makes a lot of sense. You get a nice quality guard. He's not, an elite guard. Okay, you're not paying $16 million in Aaron Banks. We'll see what he ends up getting this offseason. As I talk about, if Aaron Banks is more in this ballpark, then you bring Aaron Banks back. But I expect him with his youth, with his, talent, teams are going to look at that. Then they're going to say, oh, we can, try to get this to build our offensive line. It's hard to find good interior offensive linemen, even solid interior offensive linemen get paid a ton. And that's what I think is going to happen with Banks. But Dalton Reisner, you bring him in here as a 2-year deal. He's been a very solid guard throughout his tenure. And you look when he's gotten back healthy for the Vikings, and he's really helped shore up some of that interior offensive line for them at the right guard position this season. But he's more of a left guard anyway, so put him in back over at the left guard position is maybe more of his natural position, and you got yourself a starter there on a 2-year deal that's not expensive and going to break the bank. And then Rasul Douglas, 1 year, $5 million deal. He's had a bit of a down year for Buffalo. However, he's still a solid football player. Add that veteran in the room, that leadership that he brings, ever important, and then we can draft and develop a guy. And then last but not least, we have to account for our draft picks in the draft, 8 to 9 million range. I believe it's estimated at 8.4. But overall, just kind of rough estimating it here. So we got plenty of cap and got to think about trying to continue to roll over cap like they did this past one. So I'm not trying to maximize that cap with Brock Purdy coming up. Let's get into the roster before the draft, kind of highlight those needs once again real quick. I think right tackle of the future is ever important. I think adding in a tight end number 2 is pretty important, a mid-round need. So I'm kind of going by needs here. So right tackle being a round 1 through 3 type need, tight end being like a round 3 through 5 type of need, wide receiver late, running back late UDFA, maybe a utility back late UDFA, quarterback maybe you dabble into late. I think that's not a huge need either. Defense is more where I'm going to be prioritizing the defensive line, especially. Edge and defensive interior are both round 1 through round 3 type needs for me. So I'll be looking at that pretty early in this draft, especially with as much as they seem to value, which I love. And then cornerback, I do think is a round 1 through round 4 type of need. Maybe it's going to be more prioritized in the 2nd through 4th round, just based on what they've done in their past. But I'll certainly be looking to add a cornerback to develop in here behind Rasul Douglas for the long haul. And you got Darrell Luter too. I haven't talked about him, but he's shown some promise and somebody that I think they're very high on as well. Linebacker wise, could be a late round throw. I'm not super prioritizing that. And then same thing with safety. I'm not like over prioritizing. I think it's a late round type of throw that they can add some more depth into the room. But it's draft time for the 49ers, and starting off with our first pick, James Pierce Jr. You get that edge rusher from Tennessee with his size and length profile. He needs to add more mass, but you come here with the 49ers and their strength and conditioning coaches and their great defensive line coaches that they have. I think this is a perfect match for James Pierce Jr. You let him develop here. You still have Leonard Floyd. You've got Yuta Gross-Matos. He doesn't have to start, Sam Okawanu as well. So, and obviously Nick Bosa, but you let him develop as a situational pass rusher early on as he continues to get stronger. And somebody that on third downs, you say, hey, James Pierce, just go after the quarterback. You and Nick Bosa, you get at it, right? And Okawanu's been shown to play on the inside as well, so you can move dudes around, etc. So Matos also has versatility to move inside out. So I think you can work it out, especially on those passes, in those NASCAR situation packages. But Pierce Jr. getting you more edge talent, getting somebody for the future in some youth as well on that defensive line. Let's go on to Marcus Bowe, tackle, Purdue. Some people are going to say this guy needs to move inside to center. I don't think he moves inside to guard. I just don't think he has the strength profile to do that. He could be a center. That would make sense. I think you stick him at tackle. I think you should give him a try. And I see this over and over again. People talk about the Zach Toms. They talk about Josh Connolly this year and Marcus Bowe as well, needing to move inside. I think those guys should stick at tackle. And the reason for that, when you have good hands, when you know how to use your hands, it doesn't necessarily matter if you're not the strongest or if you're not the longest guy, because when you have those counter strikes that guys like Marcus Bowe and Josh Connolly have, or, Connolly's more of a great hand placement guy. Bowe is more of a hand usage guy. He knows how to keep rushers off of him. He has so many different counters to edge rushers where it's like even these longer guys, they can't even get on him all the time because he's so good with this snatch trap. He has the Troy Fatanu snatch trap this offseason. And I think also like Roger Rosengarten is another good example of a guy like Marcus Bowe, because he's a little under, he's not as big. He's undersized. He's only 300 pounds, and teams are going to bring that up as well. But when you're a really good technician and you know how to use your hands, you can get away with that. So I just think that's a mistake to try to categorize these guys and what they can or can't be. I actually prefer dudes that know how to use their hands as the tackle position, have the movement skills that Marcus Bowe has, than dudes that are big and slow, you know what I'm saying, and long. Like, I'd rather have somebody that has great movement skills and knows how to use their hands at the tackle position. And if nothing else, then yeah, move him inside to center. But I feel like this guy can be a Zach Tom type of player for this team and be the long haul right tackle for them. And Colton McKivitz could move inside too, especially if Bowe early on is impressing, then put him at right tackle. Omar Norman Lott, 3rd round pick, Tennessee. This guy is a juiced up pass rusher. He is twitched up, man, on that interior at Tennessee. Their only question for me is, does he have the play strength to hold up right now? And that's why I think he's going to be a rotational player early on. He's not a day one starter, and that's okay. He's going to be, you got Javon Hargrave. You still have Malik Collins. But for the long haul in that 3-tech role of Hargrave, I think Omar Norman Lott would be a great add for this football team. And then on to our next 3rd round pick. I'm going Dalen Everett, the Georgia corner. He's somebody that at the end of this 3rd round with their comp pick, I think makes a lot of sense. He is only a true junior, so he may end up coming back to Georgia next season. And if he does, that's fine. I think there's a lot of good options to keep an eye out in this range for this team that they can develop. But Everett's got good size, 6'1", 190, continue to bulk up if he wants to. But you're thinking about a Javarius Ward type of long-term replacement that can learn behind Rasul Douglas for a season or so. I think Everett makes a lot of sense with his size and athletic profile. And you show when, he's been a little up and down through his career, I'll be honest. And there's still some stuff where he needs to turn his head more consistently, play the ball better, and physicality, the catch point. But I think he's got the tools to get there with the right development. And you saw, Texas game earning the MVP in that one. He was a stud, and he's had some games like that. So you get somebody with some immense upside to be able to develop in their secondary. Then we go on to Luke Lachey, going back to Iowa to find a tight end. This guy's a mean, ferocious blocker, as well as a nice pass catcher. Somebody with solid athleticism and the traits to be a very good number 2 tight end that can work into a long number 1 tight end for this team with the right development behind a guy like George Kittle. Why not? Great 1-2 punch at the tight end position. Get a little younger there. On to the second round 4 pick here in the comp. Jake Majors, the center from Texas Hook'em Horns. He has been really nice for Hook'em this season. Their offensive line in general has been solid, and Jake Majors been a big part of that. Not the biggest guy or anything like that, but he's a good mover, and he's got some solid hand technique. He's really worked on that this season. So somebody that I think can be your long-term center behind Jake Brendel for a season and give yourself a nice shot to find a center. Let's go on to Shamari Simmons. DB, Arizona State. We're going to see him in the playoffs. Super excited about that. I've not done any full scouting report. I've just watched highlights on this guy, so I do want to state that. I always try to state my claim when I've not watched a player in full depth, but Simmons is a guy that from what I've seen just from highlights, he's a ferocious hitter, and I think he fills that, that mentality the 49ers look for. And he's been playing in the slot this year for Arizona State, but he also has safety experience as well last season for Arizona State, plus going back to Austin Peay University as well. So he has that versatility to play in the box, to play in the slot, and up top. On to our 7th round pick, our first one, Tony Grimes, UNLV corner, transfer from formerly North Carolina and Texas A&M. Been a little banged up through his career, a lot of potential, just has never really lived up to that. He has the size, the length, and solid athleticism. He's not the twitchiest guy. It's been a while since I've actually watched Tony Grimes, but I have watched him before, and he's somebody that has the traits to be, a lockdown one-on-one type of guy. And with the traits, even though he's been inconsistent, you take a guy like that at the end of the draft and you bank on those traits and see if you can develop that. Let's go on to Quentin Skinner here, Kansas receiver. And this is kind of like a Chris Connerly type of replacement here, in my opinion. Somebody with some size, some speed. He's got linear burst and some good explosion off the line. He's not the most twitched up guy or anything like that. He's not going to run crazy routes and sink and break and things like that, but he can run a vertical route tree and give you some more of that and give you some special teams ability as well. So certainly somebody at the end of the draft you take a chance on and see if you can hit, get yourself a 5th, 6th wide receiver to compete for the roster. Logan Parr, offensive lineman, left guard there at SMU. He'll be a nice developmental understudy behind Dalton Reisner and just somebody you take at the end of the draft, continuing to build out your depth on the offensive line. I was actually pretty impressed watching his film this offseason. I've not watched him this season, but I did do a full study on him in the offseason for the summer scouting. And I actually do like him. He's not the biggest, he's not the longest or the strongest, all those sort of things. So the traits things are going to be the reason why he falls in the draft. And there are some technical deficiencies too, but I think for the most part, he's a mauler in the run game, man. He loves to knock dudes down. He has that hothead ability, right? And he's controlled too. He's not like, Trevor Penning trying to beat dudes down, and cause penalties or anything like that. And Trevor Penning's gotten better. I don't want to knock Trevor Penning or anything like that, but Logan Parr, I really like his mentality. I think he's got solid pass protection as well. He's just a rock, man. He holds up to power. So somebody's, smaller, in terms of the competition level isn't the greatest, right? He's not going against SEC competition. However, I really do like him, and what I saw from him this offseason, really impressive. So taking him here at the end of the draft. And then final pick, Brant Kuithe from Utah, somebody that has been a little banged up through his career. He's a super senior or whatever. So he is an older prospect. I think he's going to be like 25. If he was a younger prospect, he would be drafted much, much earlier. However, being that he is 25 range or whatever, something like that, I think that's going to lower his draft stock. But a really good weapon. Is he a true tight end at the next level? Probably not. And that's why I'm saying maybe you can develop into like a use check type of role, right? So get him that you can develop for a juice check. Going into the last year of his deal, Kuithe can certainly be a chess piece for this team. Move tight end, move, ball carrier. He does have some experience, running the ball as well. So he's just kind of a little bit of a playmaker for Utah, and I think he can do the same for the 49ers. Let's go on to the roster, recapping everything up. Coaching, GM-wise, I don't expect them to make any changes. Now, maybe Robert Saleh wants to come back on the defense side. Who knows? That could be an interesting reunion. However, with that being said, I think their coaching staff is pretty dang solid all around, and GM wise as well. John Lynch is a good one as that and whatnot. So let's talk about the roster, what we were able to do, and kind of recap everything up real quick for you guys. Offensive line wise, we certainly added some help here with Marcus Bowe for the future at that right tackle position. Logan Parr, some depth, and maybe, swing at the left guard position for the long haul behind Dalton Reisner. We brought in a free agency. Tight end wise, you got Luke Lachey adding another weapon, but also a great inline blocker as well. He's opened up tons of lanes there for Caleb Johnson this season. And then Brant Keith, he's also another mismatched target weapon, juice check type of role for the long haul. Quentin Skinner, late round throw at the wide receiver position. Then we go on to the defense side of the ball. You got a couple of defensive linemen. James Pierce Jr., Omar Norman Lott, two studs on their defensive line to help add some youthify to this defensive line with Nick Bosa. So Javon Hargrave is going to be in for one more year in terms of what I did till you can move off that contract, but that's fine. You let Norman Lott get a little stronger, get a little bit better, holding up against doubles and things like that. Saying you need to do that a ton with him, but Norman Lott's going to be your future 3-tech. James Pierce Jr. going to be your future edge rusher number 2 with Nick Bosa. He's going to be more of a situational player early on, but Floyd, Gross Matos going to last year of their deals, and then Sam Okwanu as your 3rd, 4th edge rusher for the long haul, keeping him around I think is important too. Robert Beal can work into that rotation as well that they like to do. Cornerback-wise, you had in Dalen Everett, who's going to be a really, really nice developmental player in that 3rd round. We got him with that comp pick. You bring in that veteran with Rasul Douglas with your young core stars, Lenore and Green. Obviously, we'll see if Luter Jr. can come along too, but Everett adds some more youth into the room. Linebacker-wise, we just kept Dre Greenlaw. I think that's key. And you got D. Winters as your 3rd linebacker. Maybe Tatum Bethune can work into that 4th linebacker special teams role. Last but not least, safety-wise, you had in Shamari Simmons, who's going to be a slot/safety, okay, because he can play in the slot, play safety. So it's going to give you, if you want to play Lenore on the outside and you want to work with more of a big package, you bring in Simmons with his hitter mentality. So that's kind of what we were able to do for this San Francisco 49er team. Let me know what you think, agree or disagree. What would you do differently? And I hope you guys have a really cool day. Pardon, again, my voice and hanging, videos will be coming. Might be a little slow right now, still getting up to par, right? My voice is kind of like the throat, you know what I'm saying? But thanks for hanging in there with me. I really, all the love, man. But I hope you guys have a really good day. I'll talk to you soon.